Well, thank you all. If you're like me, you've been profoundly moved by this amazing film. And thank you. I'd like to open up with an acknowledgement of what I call like the liminal line, right? We're at the edge, the precipice. It feels like the veil's a little thin right now between spirit and earthly, ancestral and living, where our hearts and souls and our active minds have been activated by these creative offerings. They are indeed sacred. So I'd be remiss without acknowledging this sacred space and the awareness that we have of the original peoples. First, begin by acknowledging our elders that are here in the room, the ancestors who no doubt have made their way into this room. To honor the sacrifice and the strengths of these, our indigenous peoples, the Wampanoag Nation, Nipmuc, Massachusetts, all the northeastern woodland land tribes that are here in this land. To also recall and lift up our ancestors who cultivated and stewarded these lands, these waterways, all the ways of being, not only to the original peoples, but those that came by force, yet remain resilient within us. So, thank you. This is a real honor and a real pleasure, and we're so grateful to have Macky with us. I know we can see you here. Hopefully all of you can see him with us, that he was able to come in. I'm going to give some brief introductions, and then we're going to get into it. I know we don't have a lot of time, but I'd like to ask a few questions, then we're going to open it up to all of you. I know your hearts are probably full of many questions. So we have with us Macky Alston. He's Emmy-nominated Sundance Award-winning documentary filmmaker of Auburn Media. His films include Love Free or Die, Hard Road Home, The Killer Within, Questioning Faith, and The Family Name. He's appeared widely in press, including Oprah Winfrey Show, The Today Show, The New York Times. He's media trained over 10,000 faith and justice leaders. We also have with us, very pleased to have sitting here with us, Selina, Davidson, the other co-director and co-producer of this film. She is the founder of Greenhouse Pictures, in 2003, a documentary production company that has produced more than 15 nationally broadcast documentaries, including the Emmy-nominated Hard Road Home and Occupation Dreamland, which was released theatrically and won a 2006 Independent Spirit Truer Than Fiction Award. We are also very pleased to have with us Kyera Singleton, Executive Director of the Royall House and Slave Quarters right here in Medford, Massachusetts. She's a leading voice in public history and cultural memory, a recent graduate of American culture from the University of Michigan. She brings deep scholarly expertise and a fierce commitment to justice. Her work spans prestigious fellowships, policy advocacy with the ACLU in Georgia, national recognition for her contributions to reimagine historical narratives, amplifying these marginalized voices. So we are so pleased to have our guest here. I wanted to begin with what was some of the reflections that I had on seeing this film. I got to see it again just now. It was fresh each time. There were a few themes that seemed to fall in the way of an arc for me as I was viewing it. This idea of displacement, discovery, a defining determination, and what landed for me in the way of a divine reckoning. So I wanted to start with just to hear from each of you this idea around displacement and discovery. And we know that it is central to the idea of the film itself, but I would love, and we'd love to just hear from you on how it contributed perhaps to the process of the filmmaking, anything about the filmmaking process itself that stands out to you. What did it feel like to make it? And then I'd also invite Kyera to share in the work that you do, this kind of notion of displacement. How does that play a role in the process? We can start with you, Selina.
Okay. First of all, thank you all for coming out, sharing the film. So yeah, Macky and I both felt like outsiders from the communities that we decided to roll ourselves into. And but because of that, it was that much more important to us. We made the film over 5 years, that meaning filming it. And we didn't just walk in, well, I'll speak for myself, and Macky can speak for himself, but even though these were my kids, didn't grow up with my great aunties or my cousins who were down there. And for me to kind of show up with cameras, everybody's going, really? What you doing? But with still love and open arms. But it took really spending time, and the arms got wider and wrapped around me super tight over the entire time, and also my kids. And it was a blessing, but it wasn't necessarily easy from the get-go, especially when I wanted to peel back and learn the stories. Some of the stories nobody wanted to actually talk about and hadn't talked about, so that took some relationship building. And ultimately, me and Macky say it all the time, is the work is done really from a place of love, that being between me and Macky, but also in our families, for them to actually fully, and they do fully now, participate in even the broader work that we're trying to do.
I'm thinking about displaced, well, there's so many layers in regard to displacement in my history, coming from colonizers and enslavers. Also as a queer person who was told by my family that if I came out down south, it would kill my grandparents. And so feeling like I didn't belong where I came from, and feeling like an exile from my family too. I love that you brought up love, Selina, and it was a really, and divine reckoning, Karen, claiming this legacy of love, that my grandfather chose love over violence at a critical juncture generationally. And when we were in conflict, rather than beating us, which is what had happened previously in the generations, sort of in a weird way, crying out, let the love prevail. It meant that was the pathway to attempt to reckon with truth, the truth of the history of displacement, which is my true history. And I'm so undone by the dream that Selina has early in the film as she's rolling in to visit her cousins at the top of the journey, where her film professor has assigned storytelling, but turns to Selina and says, "Oh, honey, don't worry, you don't have a story. So you get an A for effort, but you can sit this one out." And this epic narrative journey that Selina has invited us into, of reclaiming a displaced history, and having this epic set of narratives, endless, her own included, but starting at a place of stolen truth, stolen history. And now look at politics, where it's a radical act to tell the truth about our history. In our schools, in our every place. Which means just we cannot wait. We've got to get about this work. And Kyera, you are such a hero to us. When we showed up at your place, it was a revelation of what's possible in terms of writing the narrative.
So you guys should know that when me and Macky first started making this film, we began by wanting to meet people all over the country who are already doing this work of reckoning, of justice work, of race work, of history. And the first huge shoot that we did was here in this area. And that didn't make it into the film for other reasons. And we met this woman here and spent a day and blew my mind. And really, that was the first shoot we did. And that, and what I learned from you, really was part of and was applied to my journey for the rest of the filming that we were doing. I will let her explain if you guys don't know about Royall House and Slave Quarters, but yeah, it has inspired not only what I'm doing with the Pink House, but also just in terms of the journey over the 5 years. So I'd love for you to speak.
Wow, you would think that I paid for this advertisement. So everyone should come to the Royall House and Slave Quarters if you haven't been. But I do want to kind of like take a moment to say that when you all came, it was also the height of us reopening, and there was a lot going on. But it was really important to hear you all talk about that history and hear you all talk about the importance of having these conversations about reparations. So the Royall House and Slave Quarters was once a 500-acre plantation that was owned by the Royall family, the largest enslavers in all of New England, not just Massachusetts. Over the course of 40 years, they had enslaved at least 60 people in Medford, but most likely, definitely more. And you know, now it's a house museum. I've been there for a few years, and one of the interesting things about your question about displacement is really important, is that we're in the midst of the anniversary of the 250th for the American Revolution, and it's been a hard time because generally Black voices, Black stories are still not necessarily very visible. Even though they're there, and when people often reach out to me, they're like, can you talk to us about hidden histories? And I'm always like, hidden to whom? Because if I talk to Black community members, they've known this history forever, and it's just about people listening to them and taking seriously these histories. And so when I think about displacement, I also think about Medford and West Medford, a historically Black neighborhood that has changed because of gentrification. And when neighborhoods change, it's not just that people get displaced, but histories get displaced. So sometimes I wonder how many people who live there now know anything about that history. And I think, you know, it's one of the violences, the violence of gentrification, the violence of, you know, of forgetting. And I think it's important to have Macky and Selina telling these stories because it really does help us to always remember.
Thank you so much. It's very profound, and I know that some of the work that we're doing here locally is continuing to try to really lift up these untold stories that are need to have folks listen to. Right? It's not necessarily unknown, but there's certainly an unknown audience of listeners. This idea of defining determination, it was clear throughout the film that you encountered walls, barriers, literal walls even, police being called while you're looking, right? The idea of bravery that it took and it takes to do this work that we're called to do, especially for a time such as this, as you mentioned, Macky, and the notion of belonging. And I know we saw that short film earlier with Jocelyn Jones where I could say the profound sense of belonging that this work means to her, and certainly evident for all of you. I wanted to, so we saw in the film there were these barriers, these little walls that you faced. If you expound on some of that, or if there was anything that surprised you, or other things that might come up, it comes up maybe in the course of your work to do this brave and important work, and just share a little bit about that.
Well, I already said that it wasn't so easy, but I'm also even going to shout this out in terms of my bravery and courage. I've never directed before, so I've produced for 30 years. This is the first film that I directed. So that was a little crazy, especially being directing and being on camera and being in these new, sometimes vulnerable spaces. And I feel like, so that was the biggest scary for me. In terms of the roadblocks, there were some that's not in the film, actually. And so I did find, before I came down, the white family that basically all of my great-grandparents, the Rosses, the Lewises, the Fords, all worked for. And I found the descendants of that family, the Stubbs family, at the very beginning, and they wouldn't speak. They did not, first they for sure didn't want to be on camera. I did find one of them who would speak to me. And so I was like, okay. And then they told us about, well, they had all of these ledgers and slave documents up in their attic, but I couldn't see them. But over the course of the 5 years, because I didn't stop the determination, and I did approach it with love and kindness, I have made relationships with these descendants, and they have started to digitize the documents and share them out and find Black families that are connected. So that to me is what made me cry, and in the work that I'm actually taking the film out and working in community and hope to come back here, that's a key component of the work that I'm wanting to bring into community to work alongside the film. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, every day is a roadblock, and then you just keep on going. And as Macky said, it's like, people are like, oh, what about nowadays? It's like, now it's more important more than ever. And it's really, if they're erasing our history, come on, y'all. It's up to us to know our history and keep our history. It's not, I don't care who they are, right? And pass it down.
I think that you mean the wall, the literal wall, the roadblocks. When John Copley told me and my uncle about the wall, the roadblocks, there was, so the wall was built in 1948. That's a particular year, particular time of white terror, Jim Crow, particular moment, people coming back from the war, and the caretaker of the cemetery was instructed, because Black folks were getting back to their ancestors anyway, of course, around the world, even though it was dangerous. And so the caretaker was instructed to, as they dug up graves for new dead people in the white cemetery, to take the dirt and block where people were making pathways to get to their ancestors. I mean, this is just evil. Roadblocks. The wall. But in terms of divine reckoning, what's profound to me in the context of evil in the form of white supremacy, evil embodied in white people, in my people, was that experience with John Copley, that my uncle, who doesn't share politics with me but loves me, in this little teeny ghost Enfield, Georgia, when I started going down, just like Selina, I started going down every 3 months from New York City where I live, and just hung out. And as I found stories and folks, I would come back and stay with my cousins and my uncle and tell them the truth, and then we'd just reckon with it. And I was surprised in the face of my judgments of them, that their reckoning was more complicated than I ever would have imagined it. And my faithfulness, doing that for 5 years, and it's for life. This is a life practice or project or assignment. Made them take it on in some ways. My uncle was talking about it around town, and the neighbor, John Coakley, was my mother's first boyfriend, said, Charlie, you need to bring that boy around here. I got some stuff I got to get off my heart before I meet my neighbor. And he told 3 stories, each equally devastating. We included one in the film. The other was about the cemetery, so there was nothing. And then the guy dies 3 weeks later. And he's hooked up to all this stuff, but he's complete, he's like, he is a soul who is reckoning with the evil that he has been complicit in. The whole system, his father, he talked about the whole town, the whole culture of his whole life. And then the very next day, I go meet, Selina said, I think the first move in regard to repair is going to be to find Black and Native leadership in the county who could actually use support. Who, when you call, say, yeah, I'll talk to you because, and when you say, is there anything I can do, they say, yeah. So when I asked that, when I met Miss Minnie Hillman, who for 25 years had been looking to find a way to open that museum, and had gotten lip service support, and then good luck with that. Which really meant, don't you dare. A truth-telling museum. That's what the word she used. So I meet her, and then we connect in a kind of mysterious way, we get along. And then I ask her, is there anything I could do? And what does she say? Look, I'm looking for this lost cemetery. Have any clues? It was the day before. So when we talk about divine reckoning, I do believe in the ancestral engagement with us. I do believe that those folks, and Mamie Hellman, and John Coakley, and all these folks, that was not going to be the end of the story. Death was not going to have the last word. Evil was not going to have the last word there. And then to see all these families through repaired genealogical work come back and claim their folk to the point where the wall came down, and now there are cleanups every month, and folks come and have conversations they never would have had. So that's one story, at least, in regard to divine reckoning, barriers, and surprise.
Sure that there's an opportunity for the audience to ask questions, and I don't know if there's someone out there that might be able to pass the mic, or
we can also just repeat the questions.
Okay.
Given there's only the 2.
That'll work. Questions, comments, reflections from the audience. Yes.
Hi, my name is Carol Thompson. I just want to say this was a wonderful piece of work, and it's I know I've been in ancestry since 2021, since I retired, and I have been fraught with a lot of frustration. Some information I found, some I haven't. So this film has been very, very good in terms of just providing me the extra push I need to keep digging, and so that was my first comment. My second is are you finding through this work a lot of people that want to do this work? Are you finding that it's a lot of people getting more interested in doing this work and helping to work through some of the research, etc.?
Yes, thank you. I'm glad you're starting to dig. Yes, in fact, my whole community engagement campaign is doing a tour around the country to Black communities, Southern cities, and Great Migration cities, because I want to help folks discover, preserve, share their stories and histories. So we screen the film, and then we do workshops to both learn how to do genealogy, learn preservation, maybe oral history. We bring in computers, and and scanners. And then we also do circle sharing, where, you know, instead of you guys see our families, we want you guys to share about your own. And then we also do another circle where we discuss, what does healing and repair look like to you? Right, because everybody's going to answer that question differently, and if we talk in community, it's really moving. And we are hoping to come back and do that in Roxbury.
This is more of a comment than anything about what you just said. There are oral history backpacks at the Boston Public Library. So you can go request one. It comes with a binder that's translated into 10 languages. So each of them tell you what oral history is, how to collect it, how to use the recording device that they have with it. And I tried doing this with my aunt, and she didn't have any stories, she said, which is not true. And then she died a year later, so I think I need stories from her. But I did get stories from my mother, and they're not the big stories, but it's a process. So if you're interested in that, that's an option.
Wow, that's amazing.
Perfect. Yes, thank you so much.
And then I'm just going to also highlight the African American Trail Project that is out of Tufts University. Doctors Kendra Field and Carrie Greenwich from it. And it's a really amazing project that highlights Black history sites actually throughout the state of Massachusetts. And one of the things that we all do together is we do bus tours of the history of Black Boston. And we're all working on the report for slavery and reparations for the city of Boston as well. And so we should link up because we also are doing genealogy workshops. So I'll make sure that information gets sent out to you. Yeah.
And I have to say that and yes, we will connect. When we come into cities, it's not us bringing the kind of pony show. It's about partnering with who's already on the ground, and it's just great and reason to bring some folks together and for people to learn the resources that are already local to them.
And I'd be remiss not to mention, so through the Wellness Collaborative Incorporated, we have our oral history project, Telling Lives, Living Histories, the ordinary little stories. It is those stories that don't seem like the big ones that are so very important. So it's an intentional project to collect the histories of our original Roxbury residents, right? So we started with a pilot. We're hoping to have that grow. It's an intergenerational story shift, so we know that there are young adults, young folks. We're going to pair and build relationship with our elders to hear their stories captured and have it live on. So lots to do. Other questions?
Just two questions real fast. Just like in the movie Vanish, when you went to the being thrown off of the or asked to leave from the Black cemetery, and then what is it about the city as far as they don't want Black people to reclaim their ancestral roots and everything, and also to the gentleman, as far as his community had a lot of Trump signs. I wonder what happened when he told his family.
So I'll answer about so Macky was a question about the being shut out of the police vehicle, and then he also wanted to know, I'll do that one, and then wanting to know, he noticed all the Trump signs in Penfield and like what was the real reality in that situation. So in the cemetery, yeah, it was kind of crazy. And what's interesting, what happened is that was, like my family forgot that existed. They had a memory of going someplace as a child, but they had no idea where it was. There was a housing development that was built on the other side of it, and they did not and do not want anybody in there. And so they were the ones who called on us, because it's like, and then I, of course, told my family, they're like, oh my God, you found it, can we clean? And that is a barrier. They don't want it clean. They don't want people coming that close to their house. The cemeteries are like in their backyard, basically. But we did actually find one more white woman, and she was the beginning of me actually solving that Sally was really in there, because she had inherited paperwork in her house. She was like, she saw us on the street, and it was right after, I think the police were called, and we were like getting ready to go. she's like, come over to my house, I think I can help you. I have some stuff you might wanna see. And she had all of this stuff written of somebody who had documented that century. And it was all white people. That was why I was like, I don't know if that's really her. But her name was on it, and it was her. So it's like this, and Monroe is segregated. It's still, you know, the code, you know, the unspoken codes are still down there. But there's some, I'm trying to change it a little bit, because I kind of ignore it. I'm like, what?
There's a lot of time. I know that we have a few minutes. I want Macky have opportunity to.
Just as far as
Yes.
how the goal is fair.
Yes.
One thing that I just wanted to say is that we just went in Los Angeles 2 nights ago, and the woman who sang the song at the end came up to us and said, "Do you know what my last name is?" And we said, "Yeah, I think," she said, "it's Cosper. And you know, my family comes from down there." This is a black woman, and I think we hold the keys to one another's histories and are interwoven in wild ways. And as we've traveled with the film, we've met people and learned things along the way who have held the keys to our own histories, and that's fascinating. So I'm learning some today. I think my response is a little like Selina's in regard to ignoring it and just doing the work. But also, I would say that my goal was not to make a whole lot of noise, but rather to be in service of Minnie Hillman's work, and also other organizers on the ground. And one of them, for example, Doug Thompson, a historian at Mercer University, who showed me around, he had been, and I don't want to talk out of turn, but he had been working with others at Mercer University to get the university to become a part of the consortium of colleges and universities studying slavery. That is kind of a pathway toward comparative engagement as an institution. And I think the cemetery work led, and the exposure led to people who might have been voting for Trump, believing that they had to get on the right side of the story, the narrative. And in this context, and there was another student who was writing a master's thesis on history of enslavement at Mercer University. That's when the university, because of the documentary, and then they shifted and allowed Doug Thompson and others to get the university to sign on. And so, you know, I think that Trumpism, white supremacy, and white terror show up in different formations. And in a kind of get out way, they're me, they're in my family, they're in the house. But even in those souls, like with John Coakley, that's not the only, they're not only doing this test. And so I don't understand the mystery, again, of how it is that when I rolled into my family reunion, we weren't running the town. I don't understand why the Black Cemetery hasn't been desecrated, but instead more and more white and Black people are organizing to clean it up. I don't know if that's a temporary feel-good something that is nothing compared to the power of Trumpism and the terror. But I do believe that death doesn't in the end have the last word. I really do believe that love will prevail. And so I don't think that's an adequate answer. I think about Mimi's bravery and the fact that the people who lynched, who killed her uncle, Alec Champion, on the train tracks behind her museum, are likely in the grocery store with her. And yet the museum is doing better and better, and I continue to be a volunteer in a corps around her, and as she gets more exposure, even through this film, I think that she has more power, and the community around her, and the people show up who are in the community, and that's been a surprise to me. Like, I read the community as all Trumpers on the white side, And in making the film, all these white folk have shown up saying like, oh my God, thank you so much for telling the truth of our history. And so we'll see, time will tell, but I gotta keep going and showing up. Particularly for the young folk, you know, I think that there's a presence in Selina's narrative and mine of the kids who are watching, black and white, and my own children, Latinx, black and white. And I know cousins of mine in my generation and my parents, but also children who came up and said, thank God for you, thank God for this. We thought we were the only ones.
Thank you. Thank you all for your bravery, for your courage, and your vision, for sure. If there's any closing word or thought, I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to speak into that.
So I was just, and I'm gonna make this very quick, very moved about the cemetery and finding your ancestors and then people mobilizing to clean it up. And I wanna say that one of the things I thought about was that if any of you have been to any of the historic cemeteries here in Boston, you'll know that some of them are open and some of them are closed actually. And I think some of that has to do with funding, but the ones that are closed, specifically in Roxbury, have, whole Black ancestors from the 17th, 18th, and 19th century. And I think one of the things that we have to take seriously is how poor and working class Black people have been treated throughout time. And there's something really sad to me about people not being able to go and honor their ancestors. And so, again, while this is about the South, it also resonates here as well. And right in Roxbury, if you were trying to go to the cemetery here, it's locked, you gotta call. And if you try to go to the South Burying Grounds over in the South End, it's locked and you have to call. And that's not true for Copp's Hill and other places as well. So, it's a problem.
Oh, final words. Well, mostly just so happy that you guys received the film. And I can't wait to come back. Yeah, and you guys can tell all your friends and family to come. I also wanted to, I don't know if this is a parting word, but when I was saying how Royall House and Site Quarters inspired me, it honestly really did, between yours and Mamie. So the Pink House, in what I mostly would like to do with it, and that is the reparative genealogy work, but at the core, in the very beginning of it, was my great-great-aunt was a domestic here. In this big old fancy white house, and which is on the historical, preservation, whatever. And in me buying it, to turn it into a community center, was also to honor her and flip the narrative so that she is centered in the story of this historical home, because she was there for a century and she was the one washing the floors, right? And that was really
Absolutely. Thank you. Getting the hindsight. We are going to wrap up. We thank you so very much for your time. Really, really do appreciate your efforts, your visions. Reparations, it really is about repair. I have to say, as a psychologist, this is not just about the material, this is the immaterial. The human experience is one that falls in disconnection and reconnection. This is works of hearts and minds, and it is so real. And I'm hearing Ms. Hillman say, right, if we can just imagine people that would just be gifted the opportunity just to be. That's the work that we're called to do, and I thank all of you for doing it. Thank you so much.
I also asked everybody, if you want to know more, it's appsofreparation.com, and you can see. It's actually less about the film and more about the other work we're doing. Thank y'all.